I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. It is Monday, June 21st, and we are back live for your faces to see, not just your ears. As you probably noticed, I was putting these podcasts up like a day late as well last week. That was my bad. I got back from the Disney parks a lot later than I expected, and it was a lot more work than I expected, and so I was a little bit tired. I was working on putting those things up really, really late, so those apologize about those getting out a day late, but we are back. We'll be back on our regular schedule, and it is Monday, so I've got Matt and Dennis with me. Before we kick off talking the NFC West, Seattle Seahawks, and the Los Angeles Rams, how you guys doing today?
You know what? I'm doing fantastic. Busy day at work. Had my brother in town from Dallas all weekend for my mom's 75th birthday. And then, hung out for Father's Day. I don't envy him. He drove from Dallas to Ohio on Friday and then got up at 3 o'clock this morning and drove from Ohio to Dallas, and he's working tomorrow.
Jeez, that's a drive. That's a drive. I think it was like 20 hours, right? 18 hours? Woo!
16, I think, is what it is. 16 or 17. Not at all. But, hey, I'm doing great. Other than having to get up at 3 a.m. this morning to be a good brother and say goodbye to him. I debated letting him just leave, saying my goodbyes when I went to bed. That would have, Other than that, I'm doing great. Looking forward to doing it live. So,
yeah, it's actually cooler here. It's been in the 60s all day today after being in the 90s. Colorado Springs, as you know, doesn't get up that high. We hit 100 degrees for the 10th time in history last week, so it was not great for those of us not blessed with air conditioning.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who
not
gets,
blessed yet.
Yeah, not blessed yet.
It's coming. It's coming. All this money you're making on these podcasts. That's what we're gonna get you. We're gonna get you that AC, man. No, I understand. As someone who sees 100 like triple digits 2 to 3 months out of the year, AC is a godsend. So yes, I hope that that gets to you quicker than usual here. So Seattle Seahawks, their 2020 finish. They finished 11-5 and in first place. They lost 30-20 to the Rams in the wild card round. Their key additions, they added Gerald Everett, the tight end, and Aldon Smith, the linebacker. Their key losses, Carlos Hyde, the running back, goes to the Jacksonville Jaguars. David Moore, the wide receiver, goes to the Panthers. Shaquille Griffin, the cornerback, goes to the Jaguars, and Jacob Hollister, the tight end, goes to the Bills. Draft pick, the big one that everybody talked about, obviously, Dwayne Eskridge, wide receiver in the second round, the Senior Bowl standout. Last season, we let Russ cook. What about 2021, Dennis? Will the Seahawks be more run-heavy? What will it mean for the team in fantasy?
Well, it was one of those situations where I feel like they let Russ cook, and then they were like, you know what? We should just order takeout for the rest of the season. And they kind of dialed it down a little bit the last half of the season and took a little bit off of Russ's stove. He had in the second half, he had games with 28, 31, 27, 27, 32 pass attempts after having 40, 50, 41 in the first half of the season. So as much as I think Russ wants to keep cooking, I don't think Pete Carroll can get out of his own way, and he's going to try to dial it down and play a little bit more balanced. I think Russ provides a lot of opportunity. He's still going to be a QB1 in my book. He's still, while he's getting a little bit older, he's still a very good runner and a very smart runner. So if you're looking, you probably 300, 400, maybe 450 if he runs a little bit extra on the ground and a couple touchdowns. But is he going to throw the ball 558 times again? That was his. I think that was his career high. That's. I think if he gets there, it's because he, is playing 17 games. I think he's probably going to be closer to the, 520, 510 range.
Yeah, I mean, letting Russ cook was exciting at the beginning of the season, but it sure seemed like the Seahawks struggled in general in the back half of the season. I think that what part of the realization was they need to get back to a more successful formula for themselves, which was kind of running, controlling the clock, playing better defense. We've seen them try to make some moves that way. Chris Carson, they re-signed him. He seems to be a good fit. Dennis's homeboy, Rashad Penny, should be back. I expect them to run a little bit more. I still think, for fantasy, you're teetering on the brink of letting your penny dream die. It's flicking that penny into the wishing well.
I think they're just going to let those shares die on my roster. Call it a day.
I still think Metcalf ends up being fine. To me, still a wide receiver one. Might see Lockett take a little bit of a step back because he seemed to be somebody who was a top 10 finish because of volume. Be interested to see how they get some of these other passing game pieces involved. But I would expect we're going to see a little bit stronger rushing performance, which seemed to be something they were missing a lot last year.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's going to happen either the first half or the second half. I just feel like we've seen a couple years prior, Russell Wilson has struggled in the beginning part of the season, then lit it up the back half. This year we saw him succeed in the early half and then kind of falter in the second half. I wonder how much of that has to go with the offensive line. I still don't think their offensive line is that good. Even though they've tried to invest in it, they've tried to make trades, it still just has not been one of the better offensive lines. They bring Chris Carson back, so I do think he's going to be a focal point of that offense. They added Eskridge, who I think could play some of the Tyler Lockett role, and then they added undrafted free agent Tamorion Terry, who I think could play in the Metcalf role. So they've really kind of helped booster up the wide receivers. But I do expect them to be a little bit more run heavy. We saw all the stuff with Russell Wilson in the offseason, wanted to be traded. Then he came out recently and said he didn't want to be traded. He's always wanted to be in Seattle. I'll be interested to see what this offense is because I think fantasy-wise, we want to see Russell Wilson kind of take that next step and let him cook for a whole season. But it hasn't quite seemed to work out. I just think that they succeed more when they base their offense more on the run than they do the passing side. So fantasy finishes.
If I could correct an earlier statement, Russ actually had over 500 yards rushing last season. So I don't think it's out of the question for him to top 500 again this year, which is going to be what helps to propel him and keep him up in that top 10 QB range. Konami code quarterbacks are all the rage, and I think he's one of the veteran quarterbacks that have that rushing ability. So, if he gets another 80 rushing attempts and 500 yards to go along with 510 passing attempts, he should be in real good shape.
Yeah, I agree. So what do we expect from Wilson in 2021? Is he still a QB1? Last year, he finished as QB6, 4,212 yards, 40 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 513 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, maybe not as many passing touchdowns if they're not letting them cook as much, but he's always provided some pretty decent rushing stats, and I would suspect that that's going to continue. The question is not for me so much is he going to be a QB1 as where does he finishing the QB1 range? We've seen him in the past be up in the top 5 or 6. I tend to think he's going to be in the 10 to 12 range this year.
Yeah, I mean, he had 26 of his touchdown passes last year went to his top 3 receivers in Metcalf, Lockett, and David Moore. So then it was Freddie Swain with 2 touchdowns was the next receiver. So I think he'll continue to lean on that. Tyler Lockett doesn't have the physical presence that DK Metcalf has, but he's shown over his career that he's an effective red zone wide receiver. I think the biggest challenge is going to be both of them are going to feel overdrafted some weeks because there's going to be weeks where it's either all Lockett or all Metcalf. And because we're expecting Russ to tone it down a little bit, or more so Pete Carroll to tone down the passing game a little bit, that might be a little bit frustrating. But in 17 games, I probably expect him to pretty comfortably break the 4,000 yard mark. I mean, he's probably only going to, if he drops from 460 to 410, but you're adding a 17th game, so he's probably going to break 4,000 yards. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him drop from 40 touchdowns to 32 touchdowns.
Yeah. So sticks last year, Ryan Tannehill, Tom Brady, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Kirk Cousins, and Matt Ryan finished out the top 12 behind him. Obviously, likely, I think it's fair to say Deshaun Watson's not going to be in the top 12. We all talked about we don't think he plays this year, so that drops at least one guy out. Ryan Tannehill adding in a Julio Jones, maybe he jumps him. I don't think Brady does. I think Herbert has a really good shot to jump him. And probably Lamar. I have been back in on the Lamar Jackson train this year on him being back into that top 5 QB range. So I still think he finishes around 6 or 7. I don't think he falls out of the top 12. I think he's easily a QB1. I do think when you go back the past couple of years, like I talked about, even when he faltered at the beginning of the season and they had their offenses more based on the run, he still finished as a top 12 quarterback because I think that running game really kind of helps open up things downfield. And DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, especially when Lockett's healthy, those guys are amazing wide receivers, and they just work well in that offense, and they work well with Russell Wilson. So I expect him to finish in the same, right around the 6 to 7 range for me. Chris Carson, they did bring him back on, was it a 1-year deal? Is that correct? 2-year deal? He is back, and Rashad Penny returns from injury. Who leads this backfield, Dennis? Chris Carson did finish his RB19 last year with 141 carries, 681 yards, 5 touchdowns, 37 receptions, 287 yards receiving on 4 touchdowns.
Well, I'm pretty much in on Chris Carson. I think he's a solid running back 2 with low-end running back 1 upside. He showed with 37 receptions that he has the ability to catch the ball. He's got a good all-around game. What Chris Carson doesn't have is the explosiveness that Rashad Penny has. The question is after going into 4 years of injury history, what kind of explosiveness does Rashad Penny still have? I think that the Seahawks, they want Penny to carve out a role. Is it a 125, 150 carry kind of role? Probably not. I think they'd like to have Carson at 220, 210, because I think they like to settle in, know what they're going to do. So get Penny 225 carries, get Carson 225 carries, maybe even 250. Get Penny 100 and let Penny also get 60 targets and see what happens. I think even with Penny getting 60 targets, you potentially could still get 60 targets for Carson. I could see Penny being somewhat of a third down back and a guy who gets maybe every 4th series or something like that. Gives Carson a breather if he gets injured. But Carson also has shown the tendency to get nicked up and miss some time, but I do believe Penny is more talented than the other backs on the team. But I like Chris Carson a lot. I on Friday I was doing a draft with Football Diehards, a standard draft, and I took or I was aiming for Chris Carson, and I just missed him in the third round.
Yeah, I like Carson too. I would agree the same range. I have him as a solid RB2. I think that's where he's going to end up, maybe a tick higher than where he finished last year. For Penny, I think he'll be a contributor, but I have him low end RB3, more in the RB4 range. I just think that's where it's going to shake out. I don't think the Seahawks are going to be incredibly explosive as an offense. You know, they don't seem like the kind of team that wants to go out there and put up 40 points a game. When they do, it's because something went wrong. In which case, you know, I think that compresses a little bit of where some of their supporting players end up. I think they'll have a top-end receiver. I think they'll have a pretty solid one running back, and then other guys will contribute, but it's going to knock down their overall finishes with more explosive track meet kind of teams.
Yeah, as long as Carson's able to stay healthy, I expect him to finish right around this, and maybe not a little bit higher. I do think, obviously, the injuries affect him a little bit last year, and I don't dislike Penny. I just don't know if you can trust him to stay on the field. I mean, I was reading a thing the other day saying that he's still not 100% back from that knee injury yet. So, well, his was later than Carson's too, right? When he tore his,
Yes.
his ACL.
And he just had a meniscus cleanup a couple weeks ago. So
Gotcha. So maybe that's what they were talking about. So, you know, if he's out there, I do expect him to get some receiving work, although they don't pass to the back a ton to begin with. But I do think he is the better receiving back over Chris Carson. Not that Chris Carson can't do it. He can. I just think Penny's a little bit better than that. But I expect Chris Carson to finish right around the 15 to 19 range. I expect him to be an RB2. And I think I'm with you, Matt. I expect Penny, you know, if he stays healthy, maybe he sneaks into like high-end RB3 territory, but I expect him more likely to be like middle tier to bottom tier of that RB3 range. Last year, Metcalf and Lockett were both top 10 wide receivers. Dennis, do we see that happen again, and which of the two finishes higher? Last year, DK Metcalf was the one who finished higher. He finished as wide receiver 7 with 83 receptions, 1,303 yards, and 10 touchdowns, while Tyler Lockett had 100 receptions for 1,054 yards and 10 touchdowns.
Well, you know, it's a classic case of high volume reception versus high yardage reception. They both tied with 10 touchdowns. It'd be interesting to look. I didn't think of it till just now, but to see what the average length of their touchdowns were, because it feels like DK Metcalf probably has a much deeper average touchdown length than Tyler Lockett. It feels like Lockett's doing the short area stuff. Though historically, Lockett has shown he can do work down the field just as well. He's just a different type of receiver. I would expect more of the same. You know, DK is going to be the bigger yards per reception guy, and he's taken over. We're experiencing the Roddy White to Julio Jones, the Julio Jones to Calvin Ridley. That's what we're experiencing with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. Metcalf is good. He's better than I think I gave him credit for. I still think I like A.J. Brown just a touch better, but Metcalf is good. What he does really, really well. Lockett is, I think Russ, after they've been together for 8 seasons, 7 seasons or something. There's a comfort level there that when stuff goes a little bit sideways, that they know what each other is thinking and what each other is going to do. And that's helpful if you have a middle-of-the-road offensive line like Seattle typically has. I think on their best years, 6 years. So on their best years, Seattle's pushing for a middle-of-the-road offensive line. So this may be a good year offensive line-wise for Seattle. But, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see almost a carbon copy of what their seasons were last year, but with fewer touchdowns for Lockett maybe. I feel like Lockett is probably not going to finish in the top 10. There's so much wide receiver talent rising to the top. And I mean, honestly, there's probably 25 guys, and you could pick just about any 12 of them. And maybe somebody would disagree with the argument that I just don't like your 12, but they couldn't just say none of your guys should be in the top 12. And it's the wide receiver position is really, really strong and really, really deep. So I feel like Lockett's top 20, Metcalf's top 10.
Yeah, I think Metcalf is more explosive, and we saw him kind of coming on more in the back half of the season last year. I still think he remains a wide receiver one, probably up in there in the top 10. I think if they start running the ball more as we expect, maybe a little lower volume passing offense, that is going to impact Lockett more. I still like Lockett as a player, but I think last year might have been the kind of career apex for what he could be in Seattle. We're talking about catching 100 passes. I just don't know if we get back to that kind of volume again. I actually have him in the 24 to 30 range, partly because of what you talked about. There are so many guys, and last year was kind of a perfect storm of a lot of bigger names kind of underperforming or getting injured or getting knocked out. We have so many kind of offenses that we think are really going to take off in passing. Seattle seems one of the few teams that feels like they want to move the other way and be a little less high volume passing. I think that that's going to impact Lockett more.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think DK is going to be the guy. I actually don't think both finish in the top 10. I was trying to find their ADOTs, but I don't subscribe to any of the services that give me that information. I have all the college stuff, but none of the NFL stuff. So I was trying to see. I'd imagine it was
yards per target for Lockett was 8.0.
What about Metcalf?
Let me look. I'm sure it was much more.
That's what I was trying to figure out, because I feel like Metcalf was the
I just had Lockett up. Not Geno Smith. Come on, stats. Nobody's ever wanted to see Geno Smith. Come on. Seriously.
I feel like Metcalf was the deep
10.1.
Okay, so a little bit, 2 yards, pretty much 2.1 yards difference there.
Yeah,
so,
over the course of quite a few targets. That's
yeah. I feel like Metcalf is going to end up being up there, and maybe it's just because I feel like Tyler Lockett is just like a guy we're going to talk about on the next team in Robert Woods. I feel like he just continually gets disrespected for how good he's been, especially with him missing time, and yet he still ends up producing, again, a wide receiver. How many? Can you tell me off the top of your head, Matt, how many games Tyler Lockett missed last year? I want to say it was at least 2, but maybe.
Let me look. I'm looking. He played 16.
16?
He played all 16.
What year am I thinking of? Was it the year last year before that he missed the 2? Didn't he have a leg thing?
Nope, he had 16. He missed 2 in 18.
18.
He was injured last year, but he managed to pull it out.
Played through it.
He had 132 targets. Metcalf had 129.
So not much of a difference.
Not much of a difference
but
target-wise.
Yeah, so with them going, like what Matt was just saying, leaning a little bit more on the run, which I talked about earlier, I do expect them to do. I just think at the end of the day, Metcalf ends up coming away at least the top 10. I think Lockett finishes a top 12 wide receiver, but not 8. I think Metcalf, I just started looking at my wide receiver rankings right now. I think I have him at wide receiver 5. Which may be a little bullish on him, but I think I've got him right up at 5 or 6, and Lockett was at 12. So I expect Lockett to still finish the top 12 wide receiver, but not up there with Metcalf, and I have Metcalf coming in as the top receiver for the team. Everett comes over from the Rams. Matt, what will he do as the tight end in Seattle? Last year with the Rams, he finished as tight end 24, 41 receptions, 417 yards, and 1 touchdown.
In the past, the Seahawks have used tight ends in the red zone. So it'll be interesting to see if Everett kind of gets that. I know Will Dissly's still hanging out there. They had used Jacob Hollister when he was there. I feel like the kind of way that Everett finished, being tight end 24 is about the kind of range I'd probably give him in Seattle, maybe even a little less. It really depends on touchdowns and and volume. Everett doesn't strike me as the Jimmy Graham type, and that's one of the few tight ends we've seen kind of really explode in the last few years in Seattle with Russell Wilson.
Yep. Last season, the Seahawks gave 106 targets to their tight ends in total. Will Dissly is still there. They like Will Dissly a lot. I think Gerald Everett is going to do a little bit of creating some matchup issues because he does have good speed for a tight end. But I think anybody looking for him to come in and, put up 65 catches or 70 catches, I think is probably going to be fairly disappointed. In my initial draft for redraft rankings, I have Everett at tight end 18. Granted, it was a quick and dirty ranking, and I got some more work to do because as I look at it, there might be, I got to take a look at a little harder at what I think some of the numbers are going to end up as for some of the other guys. I think that Everett is the kind of tight end in a dynasty league. He's your second or third tight end. You use him on a bye week, and if he happens to break out and all of a sudden they're using him, he's a guy you trade. You say, this guy's look how they use him. Let me go get a second-round pick for him for a team that needs to make a title run or something like that. I think at this point we kind of know what he is, and the Rams didn't think enough of him to re-sign him, and they're known as a passing team.
Yeah, I want to believe in Everett. I know that, that was one of the very first picks made when Sean McVay came over to the team. He was very high on Everett. He compared him a lot to Jordan Reed after he left the Washington football team and thought that Everett could be the Jordan Reed of their
team. Did all of us fantasy analysts
compare? No, he did. Sean McVay did. There's an interview he did where he felt like Gerald Everett could be the Jordan Reed of his team is what he said. And I think Higbee was already there at that point in time. And then I think so not seeing him not do that with the coach that believed in him, as Dennis, you were just mentioning, in a pass offense, that is a little bit concerning. But we've seen tight ends go on and have success. I know that they probably do like Will Dissly, but outside of a couple games, he hasn't done anything. I know he's gotten injured, but I think Gerald Everett's probably the better overall tight end over Will Dissly. Having DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, while the Rams have a very good passing offense and Sean McVay definitely schemes things very good for that offense. The other thing I will say is I don't think he really schemed much for the tight ends. The tight ends weren't a massive part of the passing part of that offense, in my opinion. I could be wrong there, but from everything I saw, he really seemed like he wanted to scheme the ball to Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp. And Jared Goff, I don't think, is anywhere near the talent of Russell Wilson. So I don't think overall Everett is going to a team with a little bit of an upgrade, possibly where he could be the third guy in line, because I don't think Dwayne Eskridge is going to be the third guy getting targets. I don't think it's going to be Tamorion Terry. I don't think it's going to be whatever other wide receivers are even on their roster, because at the moment I can't think of anybody. I think he's going to be the third guy. Maybe it's Penny when Penny comes back and is healthy. But I think Everett's going to be the third guy in line. You get a guy like Russell Wilson there, who we've seen is not afraid to dump off to the tight ends and use them in the red zone, like you guys just mentioned a minute ago. So I actually think Everett has a realistic shot of finishing as a high-end tight end too, and I would kind of draft him in that range. Now, there's a lot of room for bust. Dennis just kind of gave you a bunch of the, not necessarily negatives, but the things against him that could say that he may not finish that high. And Dennis has also did mention there is a shot that he does. I am believing in him getting that shot to do that this year. I just think he's a very talented tight end, and I feel like we mention this every episode, so I might as well mention it again. Really, after those couple guys at the top, it's just a wash from tight end 6 to 24. So you're taking a shot on a bunch of these guys, but I really do like Everett's chances to take a step up in this offense and kind of be the guy that McVay wanted him to be with the Rams, and just for whatever reason didn't happen. I don't know the exact reasoning, but I feel like he's got the talent to make it happen. All right, so speaking of his current team with the Los Angeles Rams, that is who we are going to be talking about here as the second team on this episode. In 2020, they finished with a 10-6 record and second place in the West. Lost to the Packers 32-18 in the divisional round. Their key additions, they traded for Matt Stafford, and they got wide receiver Deshaun Jackson. Their key losses, Jared Goff, quarterback, goes to the Lions. Malcolm Brown, running back, to the Dolphins. Josh Reynolds, wide receiver, to the Titans. Gerald Everett, tight end, to the Seahawks. Josh Johnson, the safety, to Cleveland. In the second round, they stunned everybody in taking Tutu Atwell, the very small and slight wide receiver. Ernest Johnson, the linebacker, goes in the third round, and Jacob Harris, wide receiver, in the fourth. Matt, the Matthew Stafford era begins here. What does it mean for the Rams?
I thought Matthew Stafford was an underrated quarterback for a lot of years with Detroit. They didn't have great teams, but he seemed to be a pretty good producer. I like the move away from Jared Goff. Goff had some moments, but I think it was pretty clear last season, especially, that he wasn't able to get them where they needed. I'm also excited to see Stafford on a little bit of a better team with a really good coach. I think it's going to be a pretty exceptional year. The Rams have a lot of pieces in place to be very competitive in what could potentially be the best division in the NFL right now.
Yeah. I'm a Lions fan, and so I tend to have rose-colored glasses when it comes to Matthew Stafford. And I guess, maybe you can blame some of it on Kenny Galladay's injury. But, last year, by most measures, Goff outstatted him. Goff completed a higher percentage of passes. He threw more passes in fewer games. The big difference, Goff had 20 TDs and Stafford had 26. That was really the big difference between them. And so with the yardage, now Goff only had 130 fewer yards in one more game. Now, that's not me saying that I think Jared Goff is better than Matthew Stafford. I think that it's me saying, do we believe that Sean McVay is going to let Matthew Stafford bring that gunslinger mentality that we, or me at least, think he has? Stafford can make a lot. He's got a better arm. He can make the throws probably better than Goff. And I think he shakes off interceptions better than Goff. But when you have a defense like the Rams have, especially on their front seven, if they're not playing from behind, and Cam Akers looks like he's breaking out, he looks like he's poised to have a good year. And even if he ends up splitting the load 65-35 with Darrell Henderson looked really good last year for a good portion of the year when he was in there too. So it doesn't look like the Rams are going to be hurting for a running game in 2021. So are we 100% confident that McVay is going to let Matthew Stafford crank up that offense and chuck the ball to Woods and Cook? Do we believe that either Woods or Cook can be at least as an effective downfield receiver as Kenny Galladay was? Those are the questions I have.
I think so. I think part of the reason they want to do it is because of that. I think Jared Goff. Some of this is based on rumor and conjecture, right? Like, we don't know that Sean McVay was really up until like the last second telling Jared Goff where he needed to go with the ball. That's what people say. I've never been listening in on the radio calls, or been in Jared Goff's helmet to know if that's true. But I think while the stats may tell you different, I think we all would agree that Matthew Stafford is the better quarterback. And I think maybe the stats are closer than the eye test due to what Sean McVay can do with that offense. I think what he can scheme with those players is going to help Matthew Stafford. I think, Dennis, you being the Detroit Lions fan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I just feel like they've been, even when down in games, they've still been a very run-heavy offense and never really let Matt Stafford be the guy, except for when they really needed him to be, where the Rams, maybe they're going to do exactly that. And him going over there, you just talked about, they've got Cam Akers, they've got Darrell Henderson. And maybe they do want to lean on that defense and that running game, but I just feel like Matt Stafford is a guy who can carry them, bring them out of a hole. You just mentioned if he has turnover, fumble, interception, he's not going to dwell on it, and he can make the big throw where I feel like I have a little bit of a question mark with that Jared Goff. I don't think he has the arm that Matt Stafford has, and he's not going to be afraid to throw it in through that tight window and hit Robert Woods for like some big play, or Cooper Kupp, whichever wide receiver it is. So I do think that it means good things for him. It makes them immediate Super Bowl contenders. I think they've got that target on their back now. They're like, hey, it's Super Bowl or bust with this team now making that trade. Beforehand, we all thought they were a good team. Hey, are they going to get back to the Super Bowl? Now bringing in Matt Stafford, you better be getting to the Super Bowl because you've got one of the better quarterbacks, one of the better teams in the NFC. Dennis, you were just talking about how great the defense was in 2020, but their coordinator moved on. Is this a cause of concern for you?
Well, who ended up stepping up? Wasn't it their linebackers coach or something that took over?
That I don't know.
If they're not going to have any substantial changes in their scheme.
Raheem Morris.
Oh, okay. Well, Morris is a highly regarded defensive coach. So I guess I would look at that and think that the task at hand is to maintain what's going on in the front seven. And I know from an IDP perspective last year, I got some good games out of Troy Reeder and Micah Kaiser when some of the other linebackers went down. So they've got some good depth at linebacker. We all know about Aaron Donald and the rest of that defensive line. And then it's Jalen Ramsey and what can they get out of the defensive backs, which if I remember correctly, I think Raheem Morris, when he wasn't a coordinator or a head coach, was a defensive backs coach. So that they let John Johnson walk. He's in Cleveland. They're going to have that defensive backfield step up. But we all know that nothing makes a defensive backfield look good like pressure on the quarterback. That being said, I guess I wouldn't expect them to regress this season from where they were. I think Donald is still probably the number one defensive tackle, maybe the number one defensive lineman in the NFL. And so that like I said, if they're ahead and playing conservative, that may hamper Stafford. And it depends on, I guess, how much leeway Stafford is going to get to change the play. I like the opportunity, the potential for that Rams team. There's definitely, they're in June, they're a playoff contender with deep run potential, but they are going to need some things to come together.
Yeah, and I think their defense is still going to be solid because of what you said. They still have Aaron Donald. They still have Jalen Ramsey. Having some superstars can kind of help you patch things over. Raheem Morris has plenty of experience. The Rams are no strangers to changing defensive coordinators. Morris is the third coordinator in 3 years. And I think they still will have a strong defense. But if you look at the NFC, in order to compete, you have to be able to move the ball, and you're going to have to be able to put up points. I think that was part of why they brought in Stafford. They want to have a good defense, but they know that they're going to have to be able to score as well to get up there.
Yeah, I don't expect him to take much of a step back. I agree with pretty much everything you guys said. So, Matt? Do you know off the top of your head what they finished ranked last year, or where their defense finished ranked overall last year?
I believe they were ranked number 1.
Okay, that's what I thought. I didn't want to speak out of term there, but I thought that's what they said, like when they were playing the Packers. So I don't think they finish outside the top 5. Like I still think they're going to be one of the better defenses in the league.
Defensive ranking, points for 1, yards 1.
Yeah, so they were amazing. Usually, especially when you come talk about fantasy football, it's always that top defense never finishes there again. I don't think the Rams are probably not going to be the top defense, but I don't think they take much of a step back. So fantasy finishes and fantasy projections for the Rams. With Stafford coming over from the Lions, Matt, what do you expect from him? Do you expect him to be a QB1? Last year, he finishes QB 15 with the Lions, 4,084 passing yards, 26 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 112 rushing yards. He finished 20 points behind Matt Ryan, who finished as QB 12. So about 20 points behind that top tier QB 1 area. Again, we just talked about it a little bit ago here. Sean McVay, the way he schemes offenses, seems to be more of a pass-friendly offense. Got two really good running backs, both who can catch the ball, in Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers. What do you expect from Matt Stafford this year fantasy-wise?
Yeah, I mean, you look, the Rams added Tutu Atwell and Deshaun Jackson, and neither of those guys are they really relying on. That probably would have been starters in Detroit last year. It's not just coming over to a better coach. He wasn't that far behind. I know, Dennis, you like Marvin Jones, but beyond that, I mean, you're talking about Danny Amendola, Marvin Hall. I mean, TJ Hawkinson was great, and he had a good running back in DeAndre Swift. And I think we saw last year how Matthew Stafford could still put up points and still be close, even with lesser receivers and a pretty strong running game. Detroit actually used their running backs quite a bit. They used too many of them probably for our liking, but they did use their backs. So I do expect Akers to be good. Akers probably be part of the passing game. Woods and Kupp both saw around 130 targets last year. I don't think that changes. They have a nice home run ball for Deshaun Jackson in the 1.5 games he's healthy this season. And then they'll work some of the other guys in the mix. Tyler Higbee kind of has been a solid tight end at times, a good red zone threat. I do think he finishes as a QB1.
I think it'll be back end if it does. Again, I feel like there's going to be some conservative play. You said he only finished 20 points behind Ryan.
Yeah.
Well, Goff only finished 20 points behind Stafford, and he did it in one fewer game. So I think that you're looking at probably the 10 to 15 range for Stafford. And a big part of it is that he doesn't run. He's not going to go out and get you 400 yards rushing. Now, could he turn in a 40 or 45 touchdown pass season? He could. It's definitely within the range of possibilities. But I'm probably more comfortable with him at that high end QB2. Let me see where I actually had him ranked. I have him at 12.
Okay.
So in my initial rankings, granted, this was a quick short saying this is how I feel. Now let me go do research. So my gut feeling says QB 12.
Yeah, I think I'm probably with Matt, and I think he's – wait, Matt, did you say just outside, or did you say he's top 12 too? Oh, you muted yourself.
I have him at QB10, actually.
Oh, so I'm going to be the only one outside. I just don't think he finishes as a top 12 quarterback. There's so many good quarterbacks up there. I mean, as much as Matt likes to shit on my guy Kirk Cousins, I mean, he's always putting up points, and he's up there. You got Matt Ryan, who we all think is going to be in a more pass-friendly offense this year. Lamar, Justin Herbert, Tom Brady, Ryan Tannehill, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray, Josh Allen are all up there. You got, Ben Roethlisberger and Derek Carr were the only other ones that finished ahead of him outside of the top 12. Maybe neither one of those guys finishes ahead of him. I'd love to say that Baker's going to make that jump. He finished right behind Stafford as well. Maybe jump up close to that range. I don't think Baker's top 12, but I think he's up there. But Trevor Lawrence, I expect Justin Fields to play most of the season. Does him, because of his rushing ability, vault him above Stafford? I think what Dennis said is the biggest knock for him is the rushing yards. Even if he gains, 500 extra passing yards and 4 more touchdowns, while that's going to get him close to that 20 points, I don't think that jumps him over some of the other guys that may jump him because of the rushing production. And I also don't expect him to get maybe those 500 yards, maybe the 4 extra passing touchdowns, but because they're going to rely more on Akers and Henderson as well with that defense, I think Stafford is not going to have to pass the ball that much, which is going to hurt him. 15 seems a little low for me. I haven't done my quarterback rankings, but they'll probably be 13 or 14. So then realistically, it wouldn't take much for him to jump to 12. But I don't know. I don't have him finishing as a QB1 this year, but I do expect him to be very close. Dennis, Akers got off to a slow start, but really took off at the end of the season. Where does he finish this year? And as you mentioned earlier, with Henderson playing really good, how does this affect Henderson? Last year, Henderson finished higher with as RB36 with 138 carries, 624 yards, 5 touchdowns, 16 receptions for 159 yards and 1 touchdown, while Akers finishes RB45 with 145 carries, 625 yards, 2 touchdowns, 11 receptions for 123 yards and 1 touchdown.
Well, I feel like Akers is poised for a breakout. As much as I like Darrell Henderson and his explosiveness, I think he's going to be – it's going to be a clear running back 1, running back 2 situation. So Akers had 145 carries last season. I feel, 5 starts, 13 games. Missed a substantial amount of some games. I feel like Akers is going to be 240, 260 carries. I'm looking for a big year from him, and he is a really good pass catcher. I think that Henderson is going to be not so much a change of pace as he is a relief guy that's written into the game plan. Hey, we're going to get you in here. We're going to get you in there. You're going to pick up some third downs. You're going to play some third downs here. I feel like it's a 65-35 kind of split. So if you got like 240 and 110, I think Henderson loses some carries that he had last season, but has a mid-level RB3 potential, probably more comfortable as a high-end RB4. But if they can condense who the backs they use are, if they're not bringing in a bunch of different guys, it could. And I guess, you can slap my wrist after the season for saying this, but it wouldn't surprise me to see a type of, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt kind of split where they both get substantial playing time. You see both of them out there on the field at the same time, with the big difference being that the Rams are actually going to throw the ball to Akers sometimes, which is unfortunate for Nick Chubb because he's actually a pretty good receiver. But anyways, I digress. So I like it about 240 carries for Akers, about 110 carries for Henderson, with a probably even proportional split for the receptions as well.
Yeah, I think Akers is going to take a big step forward. We really saw that in the playoffs, too, with the way they used him and leaned on him. I think he finishes in the 10 to 15 range and will be pushing RB1. I tend to think Henderson's going to be more of a complementary role, more of kind of what we saw from Malcolm Brown. During that time, Malcolm Brown kind of was always in between that RB 40 and 55. I think that's where we're going to end up seeing Henderson, because I think they're going to feature other pieces of their offense as well.
Yeah, I have Akers at 11 and Henderson at 50, and I'm comfortable with Akers, but I think I'm too low on Henderson.
Yeah, I actually think Henderson has a shot to be a low-end RB2, like right on the cusp of 24, 25, 26, so high-end RB3. We haven't really ever seen, outside of Todd Gurley, this offense give anybody the ball. And I know Akers broke out in the second half of the season. We talked about it all year, Matt, Dennis, on our Friday shows. It seemed like the past couple years, every time a rookie went in there, because of how complicated everybody says Sean McVay's offense is, it takes a while for those rookie running backs to get going. And we definitely saw Akers take off in the second half of the season. But Henderson was really good too. Now, I don't expect it to be that close, 145 carries and 138. If they do split it up a little bit more and Akers goes 180, Henderson gets like right around 100, maybe 110. I still think they can both put up really good stats. And Akers, I do expect to probably I guess it's considered a breakout if he goes from RB 45 to like RB 13 or 14. I don't know if he finishes as an RB1 though. I'm one of those people. I'm not as sold on Cam Akers as others are. He wasn't that high for me in my rankings with last year with the rookie running backs coming out. And I still have a lot of running backs ahead of him. Maybe that'll change as we get later into or closer to the season. We start doing our rankings. But just looking at it right now, I think I have Akers right around 14, 15, and Henderson.
I'm at 14 too.
Okay, so and Henderson right around 24 to 26. I think they're both going to be out there a lot, and Henderson's still going to get work. And I mean, in redraft leagues, I think I'd almost take Henderson over Akers at his value. Akers is going as like a second, early third round pick, where Henderson in a draft I'm in right now. Granted, it's a dynasty startup, but I think I got him in round 27. So I mean, I'd take that at that value all day long. So I think Henderson is going to be a little bit more relevant than you two do. Again, not like a high-end RB2, like he's going to be right around 15, 16 with Akers. But I do think I could very much see the Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt split that Dennis was talking about. Now, while neither one of these guys are as talented as Hunt and, Hunt and Chubb are, with the way that defense plays, I think they're going to get a lot of short fields, probably get some turnovers, and if they do rely a little bit more on the run, Henderson could get himself a couple more touchdowns. I mean, he only had 5 touchdowns last year. If he gets up to 7, 8, including receiving touchdowns, that's going to bump him up the boards a lot. So I expect him to be a very good running back this year, as well as Akers. Woods and Kupp are a strong duo of receivers. Matt, what do we expect with them now with Stafford and no longer having Goff? Who do you think finishes higher in 2021? Robert Woods was wide receiver 14 with 90 receptions, 936 yards, and 6 touchdowns, while Cooper Kupp finishes wide receiver 26, 92 receptions, 974 yards, but only 3 touchdowns.
I like them both, and I think they're a good duo together. I still think Woods ends up being the higher finisher. I think he's more of the wide receiver 1 type there. I think he's going to be a solid wide receiver 2. I think Kupp ends up being right around that same area. I think he will cross into, I think they'll both end up as wide receiver 2s, but Woods more of a top half and Kupp more of the bottom half.
I think what is it? They had 90 and 92 receptions last season.
Yeah.
And neither one broke 1,000 yards. So we talked earlier, the big difference was about 2 points per attempt, or 2 yards per attempt, or 2 yards per target. And looking at targets, so 129 targets. So you're looking at about 280 yards more per receiver if everything kind of stays the same, which I think I do think from a volume perspective, it's going to be close. They're going to have to McVay is I think going to have to push himself away from the tendency to want to get conservative when he gets a lead with that defense. But I could see 90 receptions each for 1,100 yards. The big question is what's going to happen with the 6 touchdowns and 3 touchdowns. Is that going to go up? I think so. I think probably it wouldn't surprise me if Kupp has 10 touchdowns and Woods maybe 10 as well. We saw Russell Wilson do it with Metcalf and Lockett. And if they're, Goff threw the ball. What did he do? 552 times.
What also helps Woods is rushing. Last year he had 155 yards rushing and a couple rushing touchdowns. That Kupp doesn't seem to end up working that way.
Yeah. Kupp had. Did Kupp? Yeah, Kupp only had 4 rushes. So yeah, Woods did pick up a decent amount of points there. It's I think they're going to stay roughly the same. You're looking at a mid-level wide receiver 2 and a low-end wide receiver 2, with I think a high-end wide receiver 2 and a mid-level wide receiver 2 ceiling. I feel like the range of outcomes is very narrow for these two guys. I feel like you're talking probably wide receiver 12 to 28 is the window that these two are going to fall in if they play the full season.
Yeah, I'm with both of you. Woods is the higher guy for me. I think last year we joked about this when we did our wide receiver rankings, and we talked about him. I think we were all kind of a little bit lower on Woods, and we talked about how he never gets any respect before that. Then we all came in and ranked him low again, and he always seems to shoot up that projection a lot, like we just talked about with Tyler Lockett and the Seattle Seahawks. I expect him to finish right around this range. I would not be surprised if either one of them were to finish as a wide receiver 1. It would be Woods for me. I don't think Kupp has the ability to get to that stage. I think Woods brings a little bit more dynamic, as Matt just mentioned. They use him in the rushing game. I just think he's the better deep receiver. And Kupp, while he gets a ton of catches, and they were very close last year with the 90 and 92, I just think Woods has a little bit more upside. I expect him to finish right there, and I actually think Kupp probably finishes really close to him. I could see these two being the Tyler Lockett Metcalf of last year, where they're like a couple spots away. I think both could finish in the top 20. With Woods right around 13, 14, 15, and then Kupp coming in 17, 18, 19, 20. So I expect both to finish in the top 20, having Stafford there. Even with the running backs, I agree with Dennis. I think both their touchdowns could go up. I don't know. Do you think either one of them breaks 1,000 yards? Because I don't. You do?
I think they both do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if they both break 1,100, but I think they break 1,000.
Kupp did his damage only starting 12 games and only appearing in 15. So he was really close to 1,000. I think he would have, if he would have had a little better health, he would have gone over.
Yeah, I have them ranked as Woods at 16 and Kupp at 21 in my early rankings. So.
All right, Tyler Higbee, Dennis. Everett is now gone. What does this mean for Higbee? We saw him have a couple really good games at the end of the season prior, than started off last season very good before kind of fading off. What do you think from Higbee? Do you see a role for possibly Bryson Hopkins, who was he was undrafted last year, right?
No, he was drafted.
Oh, they drafted him? Okay. They drafted out of Purdue, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. So last year, Tyler Higbee finished as tight end 17, 44 receptions, 521 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Is that right, Matt? It looked like you were looking that up. Was he out of Purdue?
Bryson Hopkins was drafted in the 4th round out of Purdue.
Awesome. What do you expect from Tyler Higbee, though, Dennis? And do you see a role for Bryson Hopkins?
Well, for whatever reason, and we saw, I think Everett was better than Bryson Hopkins. And as much as we want to make the Jordan Reed-esque tight end a thing for McVay, he just doesn't seem to be doing it. Higbee's a decent, reliable tight end too. Going to have some games where he doesn't get you squat, and he's going to have a couple tight end 1 games over the course of the year. He had 60 targets last year. Everett had 62. Johnny Munt is your 3rd tight end from last year, and he had 4 targets. So for me, if I need a tight end, I'm not going looking at the Rams for a tight end. If I'm going to take a gamble and say, in a perfect world, a Ram tight end is going to break out and be a top 10 tight end, then I'm going to put my money on Bryson Hopkins. He's young. He's a 4th-round pick going into his 2nd year. And we know what Tyler Higbee is now. He's a fair athletic kind of guy, but he's not athletic like Gerald Everett. He's not super fast. He's a good blocker. He's a good, solid, reliable 3-down tight end that's good in the red zone, can get you some first downs. If he gets ahead of steam, he may get a big gainer. Johnny Munt is a tackle playing tight end. And so I don't think either one of them are going to be drafted to be starters on your fantasy team for 2021.
Well, and see, this is the this is where it's going to take some time maybe to see how it shakes out, because if you took Josh Reynolds, Gerald Everett, and Malcolm Brown, 3 kind of role players that left, they vacated 177 targets from last year. Higbee saw 60 targets. Everett saw 62. I don't think 120 target season for Higbee is coming. Maybe an 80 target season. Josh Reynolds, 81 targets, probably going to be doled out. Van Jefferson saw 31 last year. He's still there. I made jokes, but it's a legitimate concern. How healthy can Deshaun Jackson stay? What is he going to get? You talked about the questions about Tutu Atwell, kind of a more slight receiver. So where is that going to go? You figure they're going to maybe use Cam Akers and or Darrell Henderson a little bit more in the passing game. But I think that means Bryson Hopkins is going to have a role. I tend to agree with Dennis. I don't think, you see a big increase for Johnny Munt. We'd have to look, but I would wager most of his targets came on special teams plays, because it shows his average depth of target being 16 or 17 yards. That seems like trick plays to me, or 1 or 2 like giant plays because nobody was covering him because of what you said. He's a tackle playing tight end. So Higbee's probably a tight end too. I wanted him to break out. We've seen flashes at short stretches. It just doesn't seem like he can consistently sustain that. I could see an uptick in targets, maybe in the 80 target range. Maybe he's in more like a 55 receptions. I think he'll have some solid tight end too. It's going to depend on the touchdowns. If we're projecting more passing touchdowns to swing to Kupp and Woods, and maybe you have some more touchdowns that swing to Akers, it probably diminishes Higbee's chances for catching touchdowns. I think he is what he is. I'm curious to see what they get with Bryson Hopkins. He's actually the one, if you listen to NFL radio, that they've been talking. They've interviewed him a couple of times about what it's been like playing with Stafford. It sounds like he's getting more of a role and getting worked in more. I feel like Sean McVay is more comfortable using 2 tight ends and kind of alternating them interchangeably.
Yeah, I agree with that. So that's why I somewhat agree with Den. I don't know if I'd go as far as to bet that he could be the one who finishes as a tight end 1, but I wouldn't be surprised if he outscores Higbee this year in Hopkins. I really wouldn't. So I would take him, especially at his value. So with that being said, would you guys take Everett over either one of them? Or would it be like if you had to draft one of the 3, how would you rank the 3 in Everett, Higbee, and Hopkins? Based with everything. You can take their ADP into effect, what you think they're going to do, however you want to do it. How would you rank it, Dennis?
I'm probably taking Higbee because I feel like LA is going to throw the ball more. Higbee's going to be on the field more than Hopkins. He's going to it wouldn't surprise me if much like Everett had 62 targets to Higbee's 60 targets last year. But Higbee had 3 more catches and 4 more touchdowns. So I don't think that I don't feel like there's going to be a lot of regression in the touchdown numbers for the receivers in the LA because I feel that Goff had 20 touchdown passes and I think Stafford's looking at a 30 to 32, 34 touchdown pass season. So there's going to be more touchdowns to go around. I like Higbee of the 3. Again, like I said, Hopkins is a guy I'm grabbing to stash, see if I can get and hope he breaks out this year, next year. Everett, I think we've seen what he is. He's going to be that guy that flashes immense athletic ability, and you keep hoping he gets a shot, but for whatever reason, leaves you wanting more. I think Van Jefferson's going to be the real winner. I think he's in for a 100-target season.
Oh, my God. I looked, and I literally have Everett and Higbee back-to-back in my redraft tight end rankings, with Everett 1 spot higher, but neither of them in the top 24. And both of them behind Chris Herndon, which means I've spent too much time with you, Matt.
Yeah, I would take Everett over both, and then I actually think I would rank Hopkins second, just again because of what Dennis you just mentioned. You can grab him so late, and if you really think he's got a chance to break out, You got Everett, who's your shot in the dark tight end in that range with Higbee, and then you take Bryson Hopkins really late and see what happens. So
we'll call them the Dawson Knox All-Stars.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I'm with you guys, though. I'm not as sold on Higbee. I hope I have a couple shares of him, so I hope that he ends up not having Everett there. Maybe this is a turnaround, but I agree with what Matt said. It really seems like McVay loves to run the two tight ends out there, and if Hopkins starts getting more work, we're just going to see the same thing all over again. What is it?
Can we go back a minute to Dennis thinking Van Jefferson's going to have a 100-target season? Are you?
You know, I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I've grabbed him late in a couple startups. I won't say I don't hate it.
You like him?
You know, they run.
No, I mean
they run primarily 11 personnel, and he's their third wide receiver. He's going to be on the field. But
even Josh Reynolds didn't get. I mean, he only got 81 targets, and he played all 16 and started a few games when Kupp was out.
Well, they like Van Jefferson. So
I don't know. I think
again, that's 17 games versus 16 too. So.
Yeah, that's true.
You know.
All right, so
you heard it here first.
That will the Van Jefferson breakout season.
Yeah, but before we go, are we getting ready to go?
Yes.
I just want to say a couple words about Carl Nassib. I don't know if you've seen his video he released today, but Carl Nassib, the defensive lineman for the Raiders, came out and announced he was gay. He's donating $100,000 to the Trevor Project. In his statement, he said something that I think really, really matters, and that is that representation matters. I think as an industry and as human beings, we need to be supportive of people and who they are. We don't need to tear people down. Thanks, Carl Nassib, for, I'm sorry it took so long for you to feel comfortable to do this, but thank you for doing it, and let's have a great season.
Yeah, and to jump off of what you just said, I mean, good for him to be able to finally feel comfortable to say that, and I imagine the bravery, and I feel like that's not a word we should use with this, but I feel like the bravery it had to have taken him to do that and to announce that is quite a lot. So I'm happy that he can, let everybody know who he really is and live openly, and I hope everybody supports him. I mean, we all know that some people aren't. I'm sure I haven't had a chance to watch the video yet. I saw the news right as we were about to go live, some people retweeting and everything. So I'm sure he's going to get a lot of the people who are just unhappy with their lives going in and saying all kinds of things about him. But I'm sure he's going to be able to turn a blind eye to that, and hopefully he gets a lot more support than he does people bringing him down. So I'm with you. Congratulations to him. I'm happy for him to be able to do that. And hopefully at one point this is not a thing that we have to talk about celebrating, if that makes sense. This can just become a normal everyday thing, and then not made a big issue for guys when they want to come out and talk about their sexuality. So, Matt, you got anything you want to add?
No, but he was a 2-time star of Hard Knocks because he was featured in that Browns season, and then again last year with the Raiders. Yeah, with this financial advice.
Yep. All right, so then that will do it for us today. We will be back on Thursday to talk about the San Francisco 49ers and the Arizona Cardinals, and we will at least break down the first 2 episodes of Loki. I'm not sure if I'll be able to see the third one. I'm going to try and figure out a way to sneak that past my wife. And if I'm able to do that, we'll talk about all 3. If not, we'll at least talk about the first 2 episodes, which I think have been a lot of fun. So until Thursday, where me and Matt will be back with you guys, everybody enjoy the next couple days, and we will talk to you guys again soon.